Okay, so that brings us up to our next segment. This month's recap from June, actually, the state's failure. So what we're going to do is we're going to preempt this. We're going to give you a preamble about the philosophical backgrounds first, before we watch some videos, and then we get into the main news topics, videos, and various things that happened last month that shows the state failure. And then we're going to present to you some options that you can, a strategy, an exit strategy for you listeners out there. So welcome back to this week's live stream. So what I do is I always talk about my philosophical lens I use when I analyze any video or news that's worth analyzing. And I've covered a lot this week. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the preamble here. And so it's a three-pronged approach, philosophical approach you ever have. Anarcho-capitalism, radical objectivism, and agorist lens. So we're going to go talk about those first to kind of set the tone, set the philosophical tone. And that's one thing that you can say I'm dependable on. I'm very consistent with this philosophy. And I apply this to every news story I do. We talked about arson last week, this week. And we talked about it wasn't the boy who was arrested recently. There was a news story where a boy was arrested. He was the victim, but they arrested him. That was recent. We'll get into that later. So we'll get into those videos that I did this week. We'll get into those tomorrow. Okay, so Ancap. So through Ancap, radical objectivism and agorist lens. So the state is not a flawed but necessary institution. It is a criminal enterprise founded on initiated force. Okay? Keep that in mind. Violating individual rights to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of rational self-interest. Taxation is theft, regulation is coercion, and monopoly on force, police, courts, military breeds inefficiency, corruption, and moral hazard because agents face no market discipline. That's the key thing. They face no market discipline or profit loss signals. And objectivism grounds this in epistemology, ethics, reality is objective, reason is the sole means of knowledge, and man's proper purpose is his own happiness via productive achievement, never sacrificed to the collective or the public good of the Volksgemeinschaft or the common good. The state inverts this, demanding altruism from producers while empowering looters and moochers. So let's watch a couple of videos of Ayn Rand and the philosophy of Ayn Rand. Last, we're going to look at an article first. And let's take a look at that. There's the article. Objectivism. The philosophy of Ayn Rand. I recommend this book, by the way. That's a very good book. But I also recommend her other book as the main source, because that's the book that Leonard Peikoff is quoting here in this book, Objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand. Leonard Peikoff is quoting this other book called The Introduction to Objective Epistemology by Ayn Rand. That's her pure philosophy. And half of the book is her discussing the philosophy and concept integration and concept formation. And then the other half deals with question and answers from, lectures she did. And Leonard Peikoff kind of puts them together. And Benswinger, I think it was Benswinger, who puts together this question and answers at the other half of the book. And through tape recordings and various tape recordings from her lectures. And he tries to put together kind of a coherent whole philosophy. So that's important to keep in mind. So I recommend both books, this one and also an introduction to objective epistemology. So although Ayn Rand defined a full philosophical system, which she called objectivism, she never wrote a comprehensive nonfiction presentation of it. She kind of did in an introduction to objective epistemology, but yeah, it's not really comprehensive. And they kind of make up for that in the second half of that book. Rand's interest in philosophy stemmed originally from her desire to create heroic fictional characters for her novels, especially Atlas Shrugged, holding up the world while people are slinging arrows at you, and then eventually the world falls down to the people that were committing crimes against the man holding up the world. Whose final philosophical speech she called Objectivist Briefest Summary. So, basically, in 1976, philosopher Leonard Peikoff, the heir apparent to Ayn Rand, her longtime student and associate, gave a lecture course that Rand described as the only authorized presentation of the entire theoretical structure of objectivism, i.e., the only one that I know of my own knowledge to be fully accurate. Following Rand's death, Peikoff edited and reorganized these lectures to produce Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand, the first comprehensive statement of her philosophy, published in 1991. This book presents Rand's entire philosophy, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and aesthetics, is essentialized and systemized form. Okay. Extras. So, themes. We have themes, principles, philosophical system, free will, Plato versus Aristotle. She's Aristotelian. Okay. So I'm not going to read all of those subheadings. I just want to get us this pre-meal. So I'll read this last part, and the link to this article is in the description box. Go click that on and check that out and read that thoroughly so you understand a little more. So let's go on. So Ayn Rand called her philosophy objectivism because central to it is a new conception of objectivity. Traditionally, objectivity has meant the attempt to efface the knower out of existence so that consciousness can mirror or copy reality untainted by any processing. Skeptics then bewail the possibility of man's knowing reality, since any attempt to do so must make us use of his senses or rational faculty, both of which engage in processing. Rand challenges this whole approach. Of course, the satisfaction of every need of a living organism, she writes, requires an act of processing by that organism, but be it the need of air, of food, or of knowledge. Objectivity consists in the mind grasping the facts by the correct mental processes. As Leonard Peikoff formulates her view, to be objective in one's conceptual activities is volitionally to adhere to reality by following certain rules of method, and method based on facts and appropriate to man's form of cognition. Yep. Okay. So now let's watch a brief video of the history. It's like 11 minutes. Let's see. Ayn Rand's background. Escape from now. Let's see. Hollywood art. Yeah. There's New York. The Fountainhead. Nonfiction. Altus Shrug. Rand versus Mises. Spearheading libertarianism. The world to be. Okay, this is the whole video. Let me check my link just to make sure that's what it is. Yeah, the history and philosophy of objectivism. So, all right, well, here we go.
To understand the genesis of Ayn Rand's philosophy, objectivism, you first have to understand her background. She grew up in Russia, which was ruled by a czar until she was 12, then was overtaken by socialists after the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. Rand's father owned a pharmacy, and she was there the day Bolsheviks came and seized it for the state. She later wrote, "When at the age of 12, at the time of the Russian Revolution, I first heard the communist principle that man must exist for the sake of the state, I perceived that this was the essential issue, that this principle was evil, and that it could lead to nothing but evil."
Rand escaped Russia in 1926 and came to the US, but before she did, a young Russian told her, "Tell the world that Russia is a giant cemetery and that we're all slowly dying." And she did exactly that in 1936 with her first novel, We the Living. It cataloged the inhumanities of Soviet Russia, which were monumental.
One of the few things that kept Rand going in Russia was art, especially stories of heroes overcoming great obstacles. She decided at the age of 9 to become a novelist. She also studied screenwriting, and after she arrived in America, she made her way to Hollywood, where she met Cecil B. DeMille, who helped her get her first job in the film industry. Her screenplays, stage plays, and stories caught the attention of other well-known liberty-minded writers, including Gouverneur Morris and H.L. Mencken.
working on a film scenario called Red Pawn at the same time that she was also writing her first play, The Night of January 16th, and her first novel, We the Living. And the first thing that got picked up was Red Pawn, actually. Gouverneur Morris was a sort of proto-libertarian-minded screenwriter in Hollywood. He worked at Universal, and when he read the scenario for Red Pawn, he said it was the first work by some unproven youngster that showed signs of positive genius. So he got Universal to buy Red Pawn, and when Rand wrote We the Living, he read it, said it was the Uncle Tom's Cabin of Soviet Russia, and talked it up to his friend H.L. Mencken. When Mencken read We the Living, he was very impressed. But he also warned Rand that she might not find an audience in America for her anti-Soviet ideas. Rand reacted at first in disbelief. She didn't think that there could be more than a handful of communists in the United States, but she would learn otherwise. And when Night of January 16th was bought to be produced on Broadway, she left Hollywood and lived in New York for several years, and the intellectual climate of New York was even more obviously leftist than it was out in Hollywood. She began to realize that Mencken's warnings about communist infiltration in the US were spot on.
In New York, Rand also met a handful of liberty-minded thinkers who would influence her work.
She was working on the Fountainhead. At some point, she had run out of enough money to, stay home and write full time. And so she got a job at Paramount. She was working there with Frances Hazlitt, the wife of Henry Hazlitt, who would write Economics in One Lesson. Henry Hazlitt would later introduce Rand to many key figures in the Liberty movement.
That's a good book. I recommend that one.
One of them was Ludwig von Mises, who at some point commented to Hazlitt that Rand was the most courageous man in America, a comment that Rand actually really enjoyed. When Rand was living in New York in 1940, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was nominated by the Democratic Party as its presidential candidate for an unprecedented third term in office. Many pro-liberty thinkers in the U.S. were horrified by his New Deal policies, which were socialism in essence. So around this time of political organizing, Rand meets Isabel Patterson, the well-known writer in New York, and she's one of FDR's most vocal opponents. And really more than any other influence in Rand's life, Isabel Patterson helped to teach Rand the ideas on which America was founded.
As had We the Living, Rand's novel The Fountainhead went deeper than politics, spotlighting the fundamental conflict between individualism and collectivism.
The Fountainhead is published in 1943. Lorien Pruitt at the New York Times picks up on its theme of individualism versus collectivism. She's one of the few early reviewers to understand this theme. This is very important because this is at the exact time that Hitler is marching across Europe, devastating it, under his own racial collectivism. After The Fountainhead comes out in 1943, it is a stunning success, and the film rights are purchased. So she is brought back out to Hollywood to work on the film. When she gets to Hollywood, she sees that still Hollywood is very much dominated by the left, and that there are many communist sympathizers working in studios. It's around this time she and several other celebrities put together the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals. And they start a newsletter called The Vigil, where she begins to write, really for the first time, nonfiction writing about the philosophy of liberty. She starts writing about individual rights, the proper role of government, and the fact that capitalism raises all boats. But primarily what it does is it leaves the individual free to act on his own judgment so long as he doesn't violate the equal rights of other people. Patterson told her after she wrote The Fountainhead that she ought to write some work of nonfiction philosophy explaining the ideas of The Fountainhead. And she said, people ought to get that from The Fountainhead. What if I just go on strike? I'm tired. I've just written this book. I'm going to go on strike. And maybe all the creative minds should go on strike. And she sort of had this moment where she thought, well, actually, that would be a pretty good idea. And when she hung up the phone, her husband, Frank, said, that would be a good idea. That's how she got the idea for Atlas Shrugged from a conversation she was having with Isabel Patterson. In the early 50s, she decides to move back to New York City to finish writing Atlas Shrugged in the greatest city in the world. Atlas Shrugged brought together all the threads of Rand's thinking, and it pulled out of her more fundamental philosophic ideas than she had formulated before. If you read The Fountainhead, the theme of that book is individualism versus collectivism, not in society but in man's soul. When she wrote Atlas Shrugged, she took that theme to the social level, to society. Individualism versus collectivism in society. Atlas Shrugged then has a tremendous impact on the liberty culture of the US. For instance, Ludwig von Mises had always opted for what he called a value-free approach, and this is actually a point of contention between Rand and Mises. Mises was not a staunch advocate of individual rights. The economic freedoms that he thought were necessary, he argued for on economic grounds. He argued that interventionism and socialism are inefficient. They aren't the best way to create value and to generate human progress. Rand, by contrast, held to the principle of individual rights. And after Atlas Shrugged came out in 1958, Ludwig von Mises wrote to Rand congratulating her on the novel. This letter is really interesting because he talks about how she exposed the moral cannibals and how she said what none of the politicians would dare say. And so he seemed to have a sort of respect, a newfound respect for Rand's moral approach to defending capitalism.
Atlas Shrugged would draw many bright pro-liberty thinkers into Rand's orbit, people who would go on to spearhead the libertarian movement in the United States.
One of them was John Hospers. In 1960, Rand gave a lecture called Faith and Force, the Destroyers of the Modern World, at Brooklyn College, where Hospers was a young philosophy professor. He would go and sit with Rand alone and learn about political philosophy. And he used to talk about this years later, how he learned the philosophy of individual rights at the knee of the great woman. He would go on later to become the first presidential candidate of the Libertarian Party.
Rand would later repudiate Hospers and libertarians in general for failing to defend capitalism and freedom on moral grounds.
Also, Rand's followers were immensely important in getting rid of the military draft. One of her students, Martin Anderson, was actually hired into Nixon's campaign, and he got Nixon to adopt as part of his platform the abolition of the draft. Nixon is elected. He establishes a body to study the feasibility of a all-volunteer army, and a couple of years later, which happened to be a couple of years before the end of the Vietnam War, the draft is abolished. So Rand's ideas have this tremendous impact on the burgeoning freedom movement in the United States. Throughout the 60s, she develops this tremendous following and this new appreciation for liberty that some say helped to foment the election of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. And that pro-liberty influence continues to our day.
Rand's works continue to sell hundreds of thousands of copies each year. Reader polls named...
Okay, so that was a brief introduction to objectivism and a little brief history of Ayn Rand. Now let's move on to the next part. I want to talk about agorism and counter-economics. So agorism, per Samuel Edward Konkin III, operationalizes anarcho-capitalism via counter-economics, right? Building counter-economy, black, gray markets, voluntary exchanges outside state control, to essentially to starve the state of revenue and legitimacy until it withers. So white markets are fully compliant, taxed, regarded. Gray are semi-legal, unreported cash, minor evasion. Think like guitar lessons, or you make some pottery in your house. Minor evasions. Black are fully legal, but not aggressive. Unlicensed trade, drugs, smuggling. Strategy is gradualist revolution through consistent practice, not voting or violence, agora, open market over politics. This aligns with objectivist egoism. Act rationally in your own self-interest. trade value for value, and withdraw consent from aggressors. So let's take a look, briefly take a look at the Wikipedia entry for agorism. There. Okay. And we know Wikipedia is trashed now. The owner has been trashed from, has been banned from Wikipedia. So take it with a grain of salt. If you want to find out about counter-economics and agorism, read Samuel Edward Konkin's book, The Libertarian Manifesto. It's all in there. And there's another book about the philosophy, and it goes a little more detail about some of these black and gray markets that you can work with. It's called the philosophy of agorism. So counter-economics, let's see. Make that a bigger there. Counter-economics is an economic theory and revolutionary method consisting of direct action carried out through the black or the gray market. As a term, it was originally used by American libertarian activist and theorist Samuel Edward Konkin III and Neil Shulman. The former defined it as a study or practice of all peaceful human action which is forbidden by the state. So the term is short for counter-establishment economics and may also be referred to as counter-politics. Counter-economics was integrated by Shulman into Konkin's doctrine of agorism, a left libertarian. There was a kind of divergence between the left libertarian, the new libertarians in the late 70s. Social philosophy and a branch of market anarchism that advocates creating a society in which all relations between people are voluntary exchanges. Within libertarianism in the United States, counter-economics has been adopted by anarcho-capitalist, or you can maybe left-wing market anarchist, or they would be considered nowadays. They would be considered far right, as well as more anti-capitalist anarchists, sort of. Okay, so now let's watch a brief video explanation. So it's called Analytical Tools of Anarcho-Capitalism, Agorism, and Counter-Economics. Okay, let's watch a little bit of that. This short one, 2 minutes. Sounds good.
Welcome back to our series on the analytical tools of anarcho-capitalism. In this video, we're going to talk about counter-economics and agorism. So, what is agorism? Agorism is the idea first coined by Samuel Konkin III, which advocates for creating a peaceful society based on voluntary exchange. In most countries, this is not the case because government exacts a tax which you must pay and makes laws regarding what sort of transactions can go and take place. Being that the violation of such laws will warrant violence by the state against the individuals engaging in such illegal transactions or avoiding taxes, this is coercion, which is something that all anarchists of all stripes, no matter what, are against. This is a revolutionary idea in the sense that it advocates for transaction without coercion, meaning that, by definition, agorism is against the government. The logical extension of this is via the practice of counter-economics. So, what is counter-economics? Counter-economics is the practice of transacting in a way that circumvents the coercion done by the state. Anyone that does this intentionally is referred to as a counter-economist by Konkin. This is what we call an Ancap revolutionary, a counter-economist. Counter-economics can be done by transacting on the black market, but can also be done on the gray market. The gray market are things like garage sales, door-to-door sales, or any sort of transaction where, the income is not reported to.
Yeah, like guitar lessons. My mother used to make baker slave figures. Those are working with the gray market right there. So yeah, no state comes in and steals your money that you created. Yeah. So I mean, if you want to do those games, do those kind of things, that's agorism, like teaching guitar, piano. I mean, I teach English in Japan here. It's my own private school, and that's the way to do it. Yeah, you when you get paid from your students, or you get paid for your whatever you're making at home, some pottery, you get that whole money, and there's no tax comes out of it. So you get the whole thing. You put it in your pocket, or you put it in the bank.
The government, and they cannot go and tax that. Counter-economics is essentially a way to conduct economic warfare against the state by subverting the means by which it dictates trade. This is why many anarcho-capitalists are in favor of the use of cryptocurrency and peer-to-peer transactions. So using counter-economics and the ideology of agorism is key to forwarding an anarcho-capitalist society. In theory, a few revolutionaries, also referred to as counter-economists, are required to completely avoid all sorts of government intervention and coercion to bring about such a society. This is done by avoiding taxes altogether, by doing business in cash if need be, and by actively using cryptocurrency or some other form of currency by which, the government is unable to track that. The idea is that through the sacrifice, more and more passive agents would engage in the counter economy, thus move towards subverting the state altogether. So that's our fourth.
Okay, so you get the picture now. What this is about, and I wanted to do this because I wanted to introduce you to these concepts first before we get into some of the stories about the state's failure from last month. Okay, so the next video we're going to take a look at here is additional agorism and counter-economics, what, why, and how. So let's take a look at that. Okay, that's a 15-minute video. I don't know if I want to watch all of it. Let's watch some of it. Maybe we can skip around.
In recent years, especially during the pandemic, there has been a rise in authoritarian governments around the world. There has been a rise in violation of human rights and increasing
Yeah, well, we got into that. I mean, if you're keeping up what's going on in the UK, they definitely violate the right to the individual, especially their racist against white people.
paranoia among individuals towards the government officials and powerful elites. There has been a growing interest in alternative ways of living like agorism, libertarianism, and counter-economics. In this episode, we're going to explore the idea of agorism. What is agorism? Why should we adopt it? And how to become an agorist through practical and moderate means. So keep listening, and if you find this podcast useful, please like, share, and subscribe.
Okay, we already kind of covered all this. I don't want to watch it again, but feel free to click on the link in the description. It's right there. Click on it and watch the video at your leisure. Watch as much as you can. I recommend buying the books too. So now the next thing we're going to do, now that we took a look at some of these videos here, we're going to kind of steelman the arguments for the Ancap agorist arguments here. For example, voluntary order, counter-economics, a strategy, use agorism, videos above I just did. Also objectivist ethics, right-based critique. See the Ayn Rand link in my history video, and then that's the first one we watched. So we can just sort of get rid of these videos now. I'll put that up there like this there. I'll make that full screen while I read this off, so you have something to look at while I'm reading. Okay, Steelman, the philosophy's core arguments against the state. So Ancap arguments, Rothbard, Hoppe, the state claims a monopoly on legitimate violence but cannot calculate economically, no prices, profits, or incentivize effectively. Dispersed knowledge problem per Hayek. It creates moral hazard. Officials spend others' money, face no bankruptcy, and expand via crises. Private defense, arbitration, DROs, dispute resolution organizations, I mentioned that before, insurance and reputation markets would outperform as voluntary associations internalize costs and reward competence. Historical parallels, medieval Iceland, merchant law, private roads, towns show stateless order is feasible. Okay, now we get to the steelmanning of the radical objectivist rights derived from man's rational nature as a volitional being who must produce to survive. The state violates the non-initiation of force by existing on expropriation. Public services are contradictions. Coerced charity, and they were just talking about that recently on X. There was a coerced charity thing going on. I forgot at the moment, but yeah, it just reminded me of there was a story recently about that. Breeds dependency and resentment, not benevolence. Altruism, sacrifice of the able to the unable, is the morality of death. Egoism, rational self-interest, is the morality of life. Government failures prove the impossibility of good statism. Any monopoly power attracts the power-lusty and the corrupts. So now we get to the Agorist Steelman. Steelman and their arguments. Electronic politics legitimizes the state. Voting is violence by proxy. Counter-economics builds parallel institutions that demonstrate superiority. Crypto for sound money, private security, homeschooling, unschooling, gray market labor. As the counter-economy grows, state revenue shrinks. Enforcement becomes costly and legitimacy collapses. It counters anarchism without adjectives. Critiques by being explicitly pro-capitalist and non-utopian, rely on self-interest, not goodwill. And to sum this up here, these are not utopian. They predict observable patterns. State growth correlates with waste, corruption, and declining productivity. Empirical track record, trillions in deficits, wars, regulations, stifling innovation. We all know how many trillions of dollars the American government alone has spent on education, and it's an abject failure. So Elon Musk is a trillionaire. Okay, he's got 1 trillion, but doesn't even approach the power and the money that the government spends, but this money the government doesn't even have. It's funny money that they spend, and they spend a lot more than Elon Musk could possibly imagine, and it hasn't solved anything. Ask yourself one question: if you're spending tens of billions of dollars to some foreign country to help them with aid, with poverty and poverty and starvation, then why hasn't it helped them? Where does that money go to? Okay, supports them over minarchist hopes for night watchman limits, which historically fail. Okay, so now the comprehensive analysis. I'm going to finish up here. I've kind of give you the preamble of these, and I've Steelman the arguments. Now let's give the final analysis, this little paragraph, and then we're going to get into the GAO reported, the 186 billion, just to show you that the state is a failure. Okay, the state's monopoly creates perverse incentives. Bureaucrats maximize budgets and power, not value. That's right. Remember, the government creates nothing of value. Without competition, quality stagnates, e.g. DMV versus private delivery. Objectively, this violates reason, ignoring incentives and knowledge problems. Agorists see it as class warfare, the political class rulers, cronies, versus the economic class producers. State failures as features, not bugs. They justify more funding power, ratchet effect. Last month examples illustrate this perfectly. So that segues right into this story here. Let me get rid of this, and this is what we're talking about right here. State failure. $186 billion was lost to improper payments last year. How can we prevent them in the future? I don't know, abolish the state? So U.S. example, this example U.S. June 2026 reporting. The GAO reported $186 billion in improper payments for FY 2025, up $24 billion from prior, part of $3 trillion since 2003. This spans Medicare, Medicaid, etc. Overpayments, fraud errors. Politicians decry waste while expanding programs, no skin in the game. Agorist response: gray-black market, healthcare, direct primary care, cash pay clinics, medical tourism, unlicensed practitioners, crypto-funded mutual aid, bypass the third-party payer distortion. Producers keep earnings, consumers choose, price fall via competition. States fail at entitlements because they distort incentives, moral hazards for recipients, providers, gaming codes. Counter economics starves this by opting out, e.g. unreported barter for services and parallel insurance pools. And here's the example of this. Look at all those unknown payments, $14 billion. Underpayments. Yeah, I said, do we have receipts of where this money goes? So the federal government reported estimated $186 billion in improper payments for the year 2025, an increase of about $24 billion for the prior year. Oh, yes, but some South American guy who becomes the first trillionaire, he's the problem. No, your government spends way more than that and has nothing to show for it. The money just disappears. Although improper payments make up a small amount overall, small amount, right, spending, they are long-standing significant problem. And nobody seems to want to do anything about it. As much as $3 trillion has been lost to these payments errors since 2003, and it's important to address their underlying causes. See, just spending money or stealing Elon Musk's money or stealing a corporation's money or stealing a rich man's money doesn't pay for anything. The money just disappears. And these all improper payments. So it's important to address their underlying causes. So according to this watch blog here, this post looks at 2 new reports about what causes improper payments, where do they occur most often, and what agencies are doing to prevent them. Federal agencies, what are they doing, huh? So, improper payments, I mean, look at this, unknown payments, underpayments, technically improper payments, and overpayments. Well, overpayments. Yeah, just spend the money. That's the panacea. The magic panacea in a democracy. Just spend the money. Let's spend more trillions of dollars. Or we can just steal the money from somebody. We can steal it from Elon Musk. He doesn't have that money, but you can steal it from him and then pay everybody $286 for a year, and that's it. It's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve it immediately either by stealing someone else's money and then just sending it out as his improper payments. See, but the increase was partly due to better reporting by agencies. Let that sink in. We got better reporting. Well, that's why we see the increase. For example, some programs that did not report in 2024 did so in 2025. The increase can also be attributed to how much money has not been reported. Redeterminations and provider screening under Medicaid as COVID-era expanded coverage was phased out. That change represented about $153 billion of the estimated overpayments. Gee, if we just steal the government's money, maybe we can solve poverty and unemployment. No. Because the government, as you know, doesn't have the money. Total reported improper estimates. Jesus Christ. Yeah. So each person you elect from the red gang or the blue gang, they're not doing anything about it. Where do improper payments occur the most? In 2025, we look across some 15 agencies, 64 programs for improper payments. Almost 73 unreported errors occurred. 73% of errors occurred within 5 program areas. And it's no wonder when they want to keep this alive. No wonder when they keep Medicare and Medicaid alive and income tax credit. Why? Because of this improper payments. Or, 73% reported errors. The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the SNAP, sometimes known as food stamps. Yeah. The Small Business Administration Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. Okay. So take a look at this. Programs reporting the largest percentage of improper payments. It looks like the biggest one is Medicare. No wonder they don't want to get rid of it. The second one is all other programs. That's like a conglomerate of other ones. But so the second biggest one would be just one program with Medicaid. So those are the 2 biggest ones, Medicare and Medicaid, improper payments. Earned income tax credit, $24 billion. Look at all those billions of dollars. Wasted, gone. 8 reported improper payments of $5 billion or more. 19 reported these payments occurring at a rate of at least 10%. Some improper payments go unreported, of course. Oops, where did the money go? You know about the Elon Musk and the UN. This reminds me of that he was going to donate a bunch of money to the UN so they can pay for, to help the poor and stuff. And he agreed to pay for it. But he made a stipulation. He said, I'll pay for this if you let me know the receipts. I want to keep track of where the money's going. The UN declined. Well, of course, because they'll find out where the money's going. It's going to a grinning warlord with a necklace of finger bones. That's where it's going to. A Somalian general who's got an offer that's too good to be true. It doesn't go where it's supposed to go. Some improper payments go unreported. This isn't a totality improper payments activity. It's likely some payment errors can go undetected or not reported. Yeah, payment errors. Whoops. Okay, so we get the picture here. So what should agencies do to prevent improper payments? Understanding the causes of improper payments is key to preventing them. Yeah, but we did Doge, but we haven't done anything about it. As part of the effort to stop payment errors, federal agencies must publicly report. Yeah, so you can depend on the very people that are responsible for these errors. Whoops. Why would you want to depend on federal agencies to do this? These reports should include a review of all programs and activities to identify those that may be at a significant risk of improper payments. Do you think the federal agencies are really going to do anything like this? Expose themselves? An estimate of payment errors for those programs and activities. Corrective actions and targets for reducing improper payments. Well, this is why we see agorism as the more ideal solution. It avoids all this. So like for the agencies that don't comply with certain improper payment requirements, such as appropriately reducing improper payments to, you see how corrupt this government, and illegitimate the governments are, states are? This is worse than any corporation. You're complaining about Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or some corporation. This is worse. This is 1,000 times worse. But you never hold your politicians or these bureaucrats responsible to federal agencies. You don't want to say, let's abolish these things. You never say this. You keep voting for the red gang or the blue gang to fix it, but it never gets fixed because you keep voting for the same thing over and over again, but it's always the same outcome. This. Non-compliant agencies with improper payment rates greater than 10% for consecutive fiscal years. Look at all this. Department of Education, 2. Agriculture, 4. Department of Affairs. Get rid of these things. Abolish them. You can do this better with private if you privatize all of this stuff. And you just see, if you abolish all of these, I think, and stop taxing people, I think people can flourish. But you can't do it with this like this. You can't do this anymore. It's collapsed. There's no money. Why didn't they report? Well, let me guess. Yeah, ask Bernie Sanders. How did you afford that new summer home you bought? We asked the officials, at each agency told us the same thing. They said they meet the Office of Management and Budget reporting requirements by posting information on Payment Accuracy Gov. This website is run by OMB. It is meant to provide public and policymakers, oversight entities, information about federal agencies' progresses in preventing and recovering payments, but the website doesn't meet all the reporting. Oh, no kidding. Imagine a corporation trying to get away with this. You'd be upset. You'd get the CEO fired or something. But here these guys are like, it doesn't really quite meet the reporting requirements, but it's okay. We'll just vote in our king or queen or senator or congressman. They'll fix it. For example, it does not meet the requirement of reporting to Congress. Imagine running my English school like this. not reporting not remeeting all the requirements for reporting this to my wife. This is important because Congress needs this information to assess agency efforts to address improper payments and hold them accountable when they don't. Well, okay, so let's see what happens. Let's finish up with this. What happens when agencies do not comply with these requirements? It depends on how many years they don't comply. I couldn't get away with this if I owned a business. No fucking way. I'd have to do this every year. I couldn't just do it, oh, well, since I started my business last year, I don't have to comply. No, you have to comply every year. I got a budget, I got overhead. And I have to comply to myself and to my wife and tell her, okay, this is how much I made, this is how much I spent. Now, this is where the money is going. That's where it went. Blah, blah, blah. I have to do the reporting. Why can't these guys do reporting like a private thing? To make sure Congress has the information it needs, we recommend a number of actions, including that OMB clarity. See, why are we depending on the same government agency that is doing this corruption and improper payments for a solution for this? It makes no sense. Of course, they're going to cover their tracks. We also recently sat down with experts to discuss GAO helps federal agents prevent improper payments and fraud. Watch the interview below. You can watch that at your leisure. Wow, what the hell is that thing? Anyway, okay. So, there's your entitlements right there. We talked about the economic, counter-economics starves this by opting out, yes. Unreported barter for services, parallel insurance pools. All right. So now that we got this out of the way, payment integrity. Agencies estimate improper payments increased to 186 billion. Okay, we just read this. We just read that. Okay, I don't want to read what they found. We already know what they found. We got that. Here's this guy talking about it. The links will be in description box. I don't need to go through this. You go ahead and read that at the leisure. You get the idea. Now we get to Britain. This is what we're up against. Okay. So, Healy. Is that him up there? Starmer, he already left. Okay, so we go to the UK examples. Let me check my notes. Where are we going? Okay, we did that reporting. Now we do the UK defense spending, military spending. Is that what I have there? Oh, there it is. Get out of there. There it is. So this is where we're up next. So UK Defense Secretary John Healey quits in spending dispute. I would go over some of the other failures of the UK, but I think we kind of are familiar with that, too familiar with the banning on social media and treating white people like crap and just being overall racist. So UK examples here. 2026, Defense Secretary John Healey resigned over inadequate spending increases amid black holes and complacency warnings, amid broader instability. See, if you had agorism, if you had private ties, institutions like this wouldn't happen. It would be minimized. Starmer's resignation around June 26 after scandals, local election losses, policy U-turns, Mandelson, Epstein ties fallout, and the Pakistan Muslim rape gang report. Economic stagnation persists post-Brexit. Productivity woes, living standards lagging. The state cannot prioritize rationally defense bloat, procurement waste, while taxes crush growth. Agorist lens, private military contractors, already huge but voluntary, gray market security tech drones, cyber via markets, capital flight, cryptocurrency to evade confiscation, UK defense crisis, reflects inability to calculate costs. Wow, didn't Mises say something about this? What a coinkydink. Benefits without market prices, producers in the counter economy. Smuggling innovation, unreported trade, demonstrate agility to MOD lacks. So in both here, the failures here stem from coercion. No exit option for taxpayers. That's one. Concentrated benefits, dispersed costs, public choice theory. Objectivist adds, this erodes the mind's focus on reality. Altruistic rhetoric, mass looting. Ancap predicts private alternatives outperform. Historical black markets, prohibition-era innovation, modern crypto dark pools show resilience. Agorist edge, it scales via technology. Tor, Bitcoin, DEFI, 3D printing, evading regulations, and culture of non-compliance. So this is what this is about here. The British Defense Minister has abruptly quit his post, saying the government's plans to bolster defense spending in the coming years are inadequate. The move puts additional pressure on embattled UKP Keir Starmer, who resigned, and he was replaced by probably somebody much worse. So that's the gist of here. Again, more money that just disappears. But let's preempt Let's preempt some criticisms here. So the criticism would be, but markets fail too. Externality, monopolies, inequality. That Steelman acknowledges real issues. Yeah, they're real issues, but state solutions worsen them. I just talked about that. Regulatory capture creates crony monopolies. Welfare traps poverty. Objectively, voluntary exchanges internalize more costs via reputation prices. Force doesn't create knowledge. Agorists note counter-economy competition weeds out bad actors faster. Inequality from production is just. State-enabled cronyism is not. Here's another criticism. Without the state, chaos warlords defense free riders. Ancap counters with polycentric law, competing DROs, insurance enforce via ostracism, boycotts, private armies, cheaper, more accountable than conscript forces. History, medieval trade, Wild West, modern Somalia comparisons debunked by private order. And theory, Rothbard's For the New Liberty, refute. Agorism builds this gradually, avoiding power vacuums. Okay, here's another criticism. Agorism is impractical, utopian, black market dystopia. It is practiced daily. Gig, economy, gray areas, crypto remittances, homeschooling, cash trades. Failures like Silk Road shows risk, but state prohibition creates violence, cartels. Legalization plus counter-economics reduces it. Scale via tech makes it valuable. Cultural shift, objectivist rationality sustains it. Criticism often assumes stasis or ignore state-enabled black markets, e.g. drug war profits. Okay, here's one criticism, preemptive criticism. Empirical states provide service better. Improper payments, like we just talked about here, defense black holes, like here, political churn disprove. Metrics like innovation, pre-regulation heavy areas, longevity, wealth correlate more than economic freedom. Agorism doesn't require overnight abolition, erode via withdrawal. Okay, here's some moral objections here to finish up. Practical objections. Objectivism rejects society's needs as mystical individuals matter. Agorism is not aggression, focusing on victimless acts. Defense Secretary, here's what we're talking about here. Oops.
And accused the Prime Minister of being unable to find enough money to defend the UK against threats. There's been a big row going on in Westminster for...
Find enough money. The government doesn't create wealth. It just prints it. It's not real. So where's he going to find this money from? We tax more people? Maybe we'll just print some more money. Fiat currency. Okay, we can create counterfeit money.
Months and months about how to find extra cash for the armed forces and where that cash should come from. The document...
Gee, I wonder. More taxes, probably? Yeah, that's always the solution.
document setting all of that out has been delayed and delayed. It was supposed to be published in the coming days.
See how inefficient this is? And you depend on this state to, quote, solve problems? An entrepreneur like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, the modern minority creator, will see a problem like this and find a solution that people find a value in. See how that works? But these people aren't interested. They're not creative minorities. These politicians, these kings and queens that are part of the red and the blue gang, do not create things of value. If you're looking for money, why don't you create something of value that an individual sees a utility in? But the government doesn't. They can't do this. An entrepreneur does that. There's a problem with the amputees, the deaf, the blind, and the paraplegic. Well, we have Neuralink. We solved the problem. But these people don't. They never frame it as here's the problem and here's a good solution we're going to create. They never talk about creation. They're going to, quote, find this money somewhere. Maybe it's under the taxes. Maybe it's under fiat currency. Take the hint, guys. Take the hint already. This isn't working anymore.
Healy said that he first saw it on Monday, but that the amount of money that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were willing to give fell well short. He says he's unable to carry on as defence.
See, these people don't create anything of value. Nothing. You depend on them. You vote for them. Just stop voting. This is insanity. People are insane. They never talk about wealth creation. You ever notice that?
Secretary without more money to give to the armed forces to be able to keep the country safe. This piles even more pressure on Sir Keir Starmer, who now has the really tricky task of finding someone willing to take on this job.
Wow. Okay. Okay, so we already know about this resignation of this jackass right here. We know he's gone by, but he's replaced by another equally bad jackass. And I already covered this a little bit last week, I think. So what we covered here, Starmer said he already stepped down. Potential successor, yeah, just as bad. So that's it for that news. I'm not even going to talk about that. We already talked about it. Here it is again. He left. He's gone. Bye-bye. And, okay, this guy also. So, so anyway, to recap, these philosophies I've been talking about here, radical objectivism, agorism, and anarcho-capitalism, these philosophies hold because they align with reality. Reason, rights, voluntary trade produce flourishing. Coercion breeds parasitism. So last month's failures are predictable symptoms. The agorist path, counter-economic action, is self-interest, is the consistent moral response, build parallel systems, evade where possible, trade freely, and let the state collapse under its contradictions. No flattering platitudes here. This demands discipline, not wishes. And with that, peace out, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming out for today's monthly recap of the state's failures. And I hope you got something out of the philosophy. Go watch those videos. Go read the articles. Come up with your own solution, because it's about, remember, there are no solutions, right? You know that famous quote, no, there are only trade-offs. So go out there and engage in agorism and create your county economies, work in the gray markets, maybe the black market if you have to. And I do like me. I run a school as part of my job, and I do private guitar lessons and private English lessons. Yeah, so work like that. Be creative. Don't be like the government. They don't create anything of wealth. They never talk about wealth creation or find if there's a solution and we're going to come up with a creative solution to this. No, they're just going to find some more money. Here's some more money. Give me money. We want more money. You see, the government is the problem, okay? Not Elon Musk, not Jeff Bezos. They're not the problem. The entrepreneurs like them will solve the problem because they're creative. They're the minority creators. They're just as creative as an artist, a composer, or a sculptor or a painter. Keep that in mind. All right. Peace out, everyone, and we'll see you in the next video.